What made you quit a job on the spot? Worked for a restaurant/pub. The owner would come in with his buddies for hours at a time, a lot of times forcing the bartender to stay way past close serving them. Obviously was told not to charge anything because it's the owner's party. After hours of drinks on the house, no tip. Not even from the owner. This started to happen frequently. Usually we'd put up with it if they'd leave or be done before close. Then we started hearing that the kitchen staff hadn't been paid in a month. Bartenders were being paid because we made like $4 an hour. But the kitchen wasn't a tipped kitchen and made a decent wage. Turns out the owner was a total drunk fuckwit, which should have been obvious, and buried himself in debt. A week later we were told our checks weren't there on the day they were supposed to be. Then 2 days later still no checks. I told them if my check wasn't there tomorrow, I won't come in for my shift. They said it came. I got there, and they said, well, what I meant was it's actually on the way. I talked to the and I walked out. I later found out no checks were ev. I worked for T-Mobile Store, authorized reseller, not an actual dealer. One week, I had an amazing week, sold 55 phones, brand new activations on a business account with 55 high-end phones at that time. When I got my next check, they said my paperwork was not in order and thus they couldn't pay me. As a side note, they always told us to make copies of all paperwork in case this happened so you can show it to the manager and get it resolved within a day. I went over my backup paperwork with my boss. He said everything looked to be in order and he would have the office cut me a check. I went to the office, and they told me it was still not in order. I immediately gave them my store key and quit on the spot. I did go through collections and they did settle before I took them to court. The company did go out of business after a few years because they tried that with many other employees and eventually lead to an investigation by the government, according to an old co-worker I bumped into years later. The company did go out of business after a few years because they tried that with many other employees and eventually lead to an investigation by the government, according to an old co-worker I bumped into years later. About that. I work for a government enforcement agency, and I personally love to fuck up companies who pull shit like this. But we can only go after those we know about, so people, file complaints. Your state attorney general's office has a complaints page you can find if you Google, and if it's related to financial products at all, loans, bank accounts, that kind of thing, your state probably has a financial services agency, sometimes with a different name than that, who you can and should also complain to. I want to hear from you. Edit, forgot to mention most, all, states and the federal government have a Department of Labor who can look into wage theft and other cases of you getting screwed on the job. Wage theft dwarfs every other kind of theft/robbery/ etc. I used to work with one of my best friends at a popular retail store. On Black Friday, he was scheduled to work midnight to noon on Friday. The Black Friday schedule was released like 3 weeks ahead of time every year, and he had a copy of it. Had to completely adjust his sleeping schedule and missed Thanksgiving dinner for it. He shows up and the manager tells him he doesn't work till 10:45 the next morning. After an argument with the manager, he goes home and decides he's not going to work the next day. The same manager calls him at 11 the next morning and says if you don't come in today, you might as well not come back, which helped him secure unemployment for a couple years while he went back to school for all his IT certifications. Similar situation for me. Back in 2012 I was looking for a job in anything other than food but got desperate. This burger place had just opened up and was desperate for workers. They advertised on their window $11.75 an hour starting for all positions. I applied, had an interview basically the second I turned in my application and got hired 20 minutes later. At the end of my shift, which was about 3 hours, they said they would start me at minimum wage, because you haven't finished your bachelor's degree yet. I was speechless. If I had finished my bachelor's degree, why would I be working here? And for such low pay. I told them to cash out my pay immediately and I would not be returning because of their deceit. There weren't any stipulations anywhere on the sign that said anything about needing an undergrad degree for that much pay. They cashed me out at $11.25 per hour and I left. They closed down back in 2018 and every year Spirit Halloween takes over the location. Fuck 'em. I lead my team in work completed. I'm crushing everyone else. Did the same last year. Work piled up so bad on us that they told us to stop performing certain tasks, like hey, X, Y, and Z aren't required anymore, just punch through your work without it so we can complete more. No problem. Review time this year? Well, you could have gotten a better rating but you didn't do X, Y, and Z. You gotta be fucking shitting me. So yeah, I'm going to leave this shit in the lurch when I finally roll out because of the sheer amount of work I pick up off my co-workers. But fuck it, I no longer care. Edit, I did and do still have the email and it was mentioned but played off as you don't have to do X, Y, and Z when it clearly practically says stop doing X, Y, and Z, we're fucking drowning. My point was they're just trying to find anything to avoid paying people out. Well cool, good luck without me when I finally get a good offer. I feel ya man. If I wasn't eligible for a few first-time home buyer programs where I am now, I would get a new job next month. But until I get a house I'll just have to grin and bear it. My review this year after steadily working my ass off and being the only one on my team that didn't take 2 weeks off for COVID, was just well your numbers are lacking a little on your response times and your overtime is well above the 10% limit and you could step up your billable work. Well you don't fucking say. I cover 300 machines by myself in a huge state and covered for guys out with COVID. I can't be in 3 spots at once man. Yet the manager gets a $60,000 bonus for exceptional performance during the pandemic. I did find out I can get paid double my current salary in a better position with half the work and seriously considering it after I get into a house at the end of the year. My recent review was also fairly negative. Thankfully, I've already been paid my bonus for the first 6 months. However, I'm brand new to the team as of January 1st. My prior work was to be shifted over by the end of February. It took until the end of June for my tasks to all finally get handed off, so for 4 months longer than expected I was effectively working 2 jobs. Meanwhile, my trainer left the company and my boss was out on leave for 2 months, so I split my former trainer's work while doing my other full-time work and trying to figure out what my trainer did and keep my head above water. My boss summed up my performance as disappointing and said I'd be up for a plan of action, basically a write-up, if I don't improve. I'm not great at defending myself, but I was mad. I told her I was sorry she felt that way, but with her and my trainer out, to expect me to do 2 jobs perfectly, without support from her or my trainer is not realistic. I explained that a lot of what I got accomplished I had to figure out on my own, and now that she's back, I would appreciate in-depth training, but I already had a handle on most things and wish she would understand my position and the extra effort I put in supporting 2 teams while she was away. I was/am still pretty mad about it, so sick of the corporate BS. This happened at my last job. I was carrying the store on my back and got no help or acknowledgement from our district manager. Instead, they would coach me for what I was doing wrong in a damn near perfect store with the best numbers in the region. I was the GM. He continued to just rip at me like I wasn't doing enough. Put in my notice, everyone else put in theirs with me BC they didn't want to work for him if I wasn't there. That store went from number 1 in the region to number 46 in 2 weeks. What were all once 5-star reviews about how stupidly fast we were became all 1 to 2-star reviews about how the place has become a dump. DM ended up drunk texting me saying I'm a piece of shit for leaving and taking everyone with me blah blah blah. Don't be an asshole of a district manager then that never gives me a raise. Let alone a single word of praise. I am a physician assistant and took a job at an urgent care. After working there for about a month, I noticed some irregularities, such as some medications being expired and sometimes a lack of supplies. I wrote that off as the office manager not being as astute as she should have been and brought it up to the doctor who owned the place. He said he would talk to her and straighten it out. Then one of the medical assistants came to me and said, "You know this has been going on forever, right?" She then said that things would never change and to get used to it because the expired medications had been on the shelf for months and they were told to never throw them out. She then also told me that the autoclave, the machine that sterilizes instruments, was broken and all they did was wash the instruments in soap and water and put them in the autoclave anyway to get them as clean as possible. That was the end of that. I made out a formal complaint to the state medical board and never showed up again. The state actually came in the very next day and raided the place. They shut him down immediately. They found so many things wrong that not only did they keep the place out of business, they suspended his license. He was also prosecuted on federal charges because he was running a scam for truck driver physical exams. LOL, I had an inside hint from HR that there was about to be mass layoffs and my name was on the list. I scheduled my week-long vacation and returning the day before layoffs were presumed to have happened. My boss reamed me out for daring to take a vacation. She said I would never advance in the company if I chose such a formative time in a project to take a vacation. She told me I would never be an executive producer if I went on a vacation before project launch, even though I wouldn't be able to touch it for the week I was away anyways, and that I would always be known in the television industry as lazy. I chilled, took my vacation, and returned. She was mad and said that she was upset with me for having left and made her take care of my project for me, chewed me out in front of the entire company in the conference room. I chilled and was like, "Aren't you laying off a bunch of us tomorrow? I'm just waiting for you to fire me so I can collect unemployment." Entire room literally starts panicking and management tries to understand how the fuck I knew about layoffs. It was my one true Regina George causing chaos moment in my life. I was at a company for about a year and a half as an assistant project manager. In that year and a half, I had 3 different bosses, the newest one being a heavy micromanager. I was getting paid about 20% below the standard salary for the position, overworked without any additional compensation, and the overall culture of the company was just flawed. My boss started nitpicking my work at the end of the day. I told her I had plenty of time to get it done before the end of the day, but she kept pushing and escalating. She was borderline screaming and I just cut her off and said, "I'm not doing this shit anymore, I quit." She yelled back, "Well, I need IT in writing," and I said back with the straightest face, "I don't have to do shit in writing." I quietly packed all my stuff up, said good luck to my co-workers, and left. A year later, after working a couple of other jobs, I accepted a project manager position with a competing company and make almost twice as much as I was making at the previous. And I get to post on Reddit while at work without getting yelled at. Kid started in my class in grade 5, in Belgium, so 10 years old, but she was put on a personalized path and given math and Dutch at a grade 3 level. She basically continued this path but never did really well. At the end of grade 6, kids either graduate or they don't. If you do, you get to go to certain middle/high schools. If you don't, some schools are no longer accessible but you can of course still go to another high school. This, of course, was a big no-no. So, they told parents that because she was doing so well at a grade 4 level, when she was in grade 6, she could just move up with the other kids, who did complete their classes at a grade 6 level. And I said she couldn't. Parents were split. The father understood, and since I had talked to him privately, he knew. Mother on the other hand was furious. Every conversation I ever had with her was with the support staff present, by the request of said support staff, and they always continued afterwards. Turns out, she had promised the mother the kid could just graduate. Welp. I mean, I know it happened in other grades as well, and I also know several teachers knowingly put different grades in the reports, rather than their actual grades, to make everybody happy and make sure kids didn't feel bad. This was brought to the attention of said support staff and the principal later on by someone else. I didn't work there anymore, but nothing came of it. So well, education in Belgium, some schools just suck. I worked for a junk company that initially started off pretty good until it was bought out by new owner from British Columbia. The new owner started implementing so many new policies that prevented us from making the decision we once were able to make, and also new restrictions that would make us lose our profit share for the day at the smallest mistake. It didn't help that she also hired a douchebag ringer to be our new general manager who could not have been more out of touch with normal employees. Not even a month after this new douche manager arrived, he kept saying we were messing up, constantly saying we've had the worst records of the entire company, the worst driving records, etc. It's like he only thrived off of telling us what we did wrong. So we were really busy one day, and instead of actually starting work, he wanted us to have another meeting where he could scold us for messing up constantly. It was also only a week after the last meeting. We're only supposed to have them once a month. The meeting was set at 7:30 a.m. for him to scold us for half an hour and then get to work on a busy day where we're forced to go as fast as we can without messing up even once. The stress of being forced to work faster while also screwing us over with all these stupid new regulations had reached its boiling point with me. So instead of going to the meeting, I called him at 6 a.m. and told him I was never coming in again. He begged me to not leave and asked if I could at least do that one day, but I said no, go screw yourself, and hung up the phone and blocked his and all his associates' numbers, then went back to sleep. I now work for myself, and from what I heard after I quit, a ton of people quit from that place. I can't imagine it's gonna stay in business much longer. The boss wanted my team to work extra shifts without weekends to finish a project next milestone, so we can show the client that we are capable of finishing before the due date. We worked 14 hours daily for 4 weeks with no weekends, and the last 2 days we worked for 36 hours straight with no breaks since the due date was a day to 1 WAY. Everyone was fucked and on the edge, no smiles, no small talks, nothing. And we don't get paid overtime. After finishing the milestone, he thanked us and called us for a meeting, saying we have to continue working like this for an unknown period until they hire new staff members. I refused with another colleague and said we will work for what we get paid for, which is 9 hours per day, 5 days a week. He didn't take us seriously, but we didn't give a fuck at that moment. We worked the next 2 weeks accordingly. He called us and said that he was extremely disappointed and that we don't value the company. I walked out, collected my stuff, faced my resignation letter to the HR, and said bye. I was already there 3 hours past the time my shift was supposed to end, along with everyone else who was on my shift. We were all very pod. I get that you often have to stay after when you work in food service, but everyone from the next shift was already there and there was zero reason for us to be there for 3 extra hours. Finally someone asked to go home and the manager started screaming in the middle of the restaurant floor that, just because your shift is supposed to end at 10 doesn't mean you get to leave then. I tell you when you get to leave. You are all just numbers on a spreadsheet to us. We can replace you in a heartbeat if you don't want to be here. So, I dropped all the money on the table in front of her and said, replace me then, fuck you. Found out later that they lost damn near half their staff that night because most others followed my lead after. There was a huge football game the next day right across the street from the place, and they got to deal with that with no servers. I went to the game and had the time of my life, lol. It was a fucking IHOP. Before I started working at Dollar Tree, I asked if I could have a day off on Sunday and they said sure, and that they promised to give me that day off. During my first week working there, I ask every single day for a work schedule and remind them that they promise that I get Sunday off. That entire week, they refused to give me a schedule and called me at random times of the day to work, which was ridiculous because at the time I had college classes to attend, so it was battle on what time I could work. When Sunday came, I was at a carnival with my husband, he bought tickets for that day and it was his only day off to spend time with me, and the moment we decided what to do together, my boss called and told me to come to work. I was baffled and reminded her that she and the others promised that today I could have off since I work all 6 days at random times without complaint. She said in a very mean way that she never promised such a thing to me and demanded I come to the store now. In that moment, I told her to F***ck herself and I quit over the phone. Within the next day, I made a complaint to the company on how unprofessional she and the others were with me and gave them pictures on how unsafe the environment was for our younger workers there.